Hi, welcome once again to Vehicle Maintenance and Repairs.com. Gary Dela Cruz, your mechanic. Behind me I have once again a Mazda 323. It's about a 2001 model. It's a 1300. In my 50-point inspection I found quite a few things that needed to be done. Front wheel bearings that are worn. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the drive shafts. Okay, before we jack the car up, we put leave the car on the ground, pull the handbrake up, maybe put it into gear as well, okay, and get a breaker bar with a size 30 socket to loosen up the center CV joint nut. Okay, they're pretty tight sometimes, but we loosen that up, and then also we will loosen up the wheel nuts, okay, and then we'll go ahead, jack the vehicle up, put it on stands. We can remove the wheel and then remove the drive shaft. I'll show you how we'll do that in a second. So we need to get the drive shaft out all the way. So the only way to do that, we have to basically pull the lower ball joint out so that we can shift the whole hub forward. But before we even do that, we need to just disconnect the tie rod end on the one side here. So just basically it has a split pin which we need to just pull out of there, so that we can loosen up that nut. So the split pin basically locks that nut up. We get the split pin out. We use our side cutter to do that. Okay, we'll take out our split pin. Okay, size 17 spanner, and we'll just loosen it up like that. We'll turn it down best that we can, and then of course, when we have our nut off, I will just turn it up against. So before we knock that loose, let's get the ball joint nut and bolt out. Okay, there's a bolt here which basically holds the ball joint, prevents the ball joint from being removed, okay, from the lower control arm. And we just size 14 on the one side, size 14 on the other side. It's basically a nut and bolt. Okay, that gets pushed out like that, and there you can see that retains the ball joint. Sometimes it just helps to get it out, as you can see. Okay, now we can pull the hub forward like that, and then of course we can just give that a few taps over there to unhinge or loosen up that taper. So we're going to remove the whole hub, okay, because we need to replace the wheel bearings, the front wheel bearings. Okay, so quite simply, we have it disconnected at the ball joint already. We need to take the caliper off, okay, which is these two size 14 bolts, okay, which I'll show you how to do. And then of course, we'll just unclip this pipe. Okay, the pipe normally goes in like that. All right, it goes in there with a clip. So we'll take the clip out, we'll take the pipe out of the way, and then of course you will see here are two size 17 head bolts. They're actually nuts and bolts. Okay, if I turn the strut this way, okay, the hub, the bearing hub is basically bolted, okay, onto the strut. So we need to take those two bolts loose. Okay, but firstly we're going to remove the brake caliper. Okay, two size 14 bolts. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just go ahead and use a size 14 socket and ratchet here and loosen them up nicely, and then just turn these bolts out by hand all the way. Okay, you can see how long they are. Okay, sometimes the one is longer than the other, so just check that. Make sure that you put them into the correct place when you put them back. Let's take a look. You'll see the bottom one. The bottom one is shorter than the other, than the top and bottom. Okay, just remember that, and then we'll just gently pry that disc, the caliper out of the way. We'll just let that hang nicely out there. Okay, and you can actually hear that bearing. Wow, that bearing's really nasty. Okay, very noisy. Use the size 17 socket and ratchet. Just loosen them up nicely like that. Nut and bolt. It's one. And that's the second one. And as you can see, that hub just basically fell out of there. Okay. So now we need to separate the stub axle, okay, from the hub. All right. And you can see inside there, that's the axle. Okay, I'm going to take an old socket. Okay, that is just more or less that diameter, but I got to make sure that it can go right through. So all I'll do is I'll just lock it a few times like that. That's a crude method, but it does work. Okay, and there you can see, you know, that's your hub. Okay, and that's your stub axle. All right, but you still have the bearing attached, you know, to the end of the to the stub axle. So what we need to do, we need to loosen up those 4 bolts to take the disc, the brake disc off, and then we need to knock that bearing cone out from the opposite side. I'll show you how to do that. So we'll put our disc into the vise. Make sure you put I put aluminium jaws in mine so that I don't damage it. Just quite simply loosen them up. Can see that's the bolts there. Okay, size 12 heads. Now remember that the left and the right hand side is exactly the same. Okay, there's no difference. So we'll take, that's the stub axle. So now we can basically get a chisel behind there and drive that off. Okay, we'll just take the disc, put it one side. We'll be reusing that disc. I'll take the jaws out in this case, and then I'll put that into the vise like that so that I can drive that bearing out. Alright, so we'll take a chisel, we'll put it in between just behind the bearing, and we'll just give it a nice few encouraging taps. Okay, there goes the top, and then we'll just drive the cone right out. Okay, we'll take the seal, and that's the cone. All right, and now we can fit the new bearing, but the new bearing you got to use a press. Okay, well, at least I use a press. I'll show you how I do all that now. You know, the stub axle we've taken off the hub. Okay, we've still got half the bearing stuck in there. I'll show you how to take that out. So we've taken other half of the bearing off. Okay, and you know, these stub axles, you got to inspect them and make sure that they're not eaten away, because you don't want the bearings inner to turn on the stub axle. It must actually be press fitted onto the stub axle. But when these things get old, they wear out, and that tends to, you know, and then you replace the bearing, but then the noise is still there because it's actually the inner that's turning on the stub axle. But this stub axle is 100%. There's no problem with this one. Okay. So this is the hub. The hub is the section that holds the bearing cones and the bearings in there. So we've got a seal in there. You know, we've got to take that seal out of the way. We just quite simply lift it out. Okay. And let's inspect this bearing. This bearing is definitely shot. Can you see all the metal filings in that bearing? See that? Lots of metal filings in that bearing over there. You can see it quite clearly. Let me just wipe some of it off, you know. You can see that there's definitely metal filings on there. And I'm sure that when we take this cone out, you will feel, maybe see a little bit of roughness on that cone. Yeah, definitely. You can see the roughness, but I'm just going to knock that cone out. I'll show you how to do that now. So quite simply, with a hammer and a chisel, okay, you just get your chisel to bite into the, you know, if you look inside the hub here, okay, there are two cones. There's an inner and an outer cone. They're both the same diameter, but it's got a little lip on it inside there, okay, which basically your chisel will basically latch onto while you're knocking. Okay, it's not easy, but just do it a little bit at a time. Okay, so that is what came out of there. Okay, all right, that's the cone. This is actually the, yeah, this cone looks pretty good still, nice and you know, not damaged at all. But the other one, that one inside there, I think that's the culprit creating the noise. So we'll do exactly the same thing for that one. Okay, just get your chisel to hook against the lip. Give it a couple of knocks and we'll get it out. Okay, I'll get back to you once I've got that one knocked out. So we've got both cones knocked out. Okay, we'll just clean that stub axle, the hub up nicely. Put that one side. I'll show you how to fit the new bearing cones. It's quite simple. I just wanted to take a nicer, closer look at this cone. Okay, now we can see how pitted this cone is. Okay, it's got pit marks there, which means it's rough. And with it being rough, your bearing is going to be noisy. Okay, if you look at that one as opposed to that one, see how nice and clear and clean that one is, and look how dull that one is. Okay, so when you're putting your bearing on, oh, I can feel the roughness. I wish you guys could feel that, but you can hear. You hear that? Okay, so that's the noise on that wheel bearing. We're going to be doing both sides, but I'm only going to show you how to do one side because they're both exactly the same. So let's get the new bearing. Alright, new bearing. Okay, left and right, no different. They're both the same. We have the same grease package. We have a new nut, okay, for the CV joint. We've got inner and outer seal. See the seals we took off. We have the two bearings, okay, and a little bit of an instructions pamphlet inside there. Alright, so both bearings are exactly the same, the inner and the outer, same diameter. Okay, so we'll just open them up quickly. Get them opened. For those of you that are interested, the part number is part cop. It's a part cop number PAQ. Okay, so it's PQ184. That's the kit number. Okay, it is for Mazda and Ford front wheel drives. Alright, so get rid of the packaging there. So that's how it works. Okay, there we've got to just lubricate that bearing. You can feel that's nice and smooth. Okay, so what we're going to do is, okay, so I basically drove the cone in, okay, manually. I wanted to show you how to do it with you know, both methods. Okay, so that is the outer one, this is the inner one. Okay, we'll try and keep the cones with the appropriate unit, and just drive it down all the way down. Right, just take a rag, just give it a quick wipe. Alright, I'll just take some grease, stick it into those, you know, the grooves there. Alright, and just press it in with my thumb. I'll do that both sides. Okay, just press them in nicely, and when you've got sufficient grease pushed in there, just put a few fingers in the center, turn so that center piece, and then it will basically lubricate the bearing. You know, we'll do it a little bit more, put a little bit of grease just on the cones. I'll put that bearing in there like that. Okay, I'll get the appropriate, keep that little bit of grease for the other bearing. We'll just get the proper seal in there. Okay, it's a rubber seal, so it should go in pretty easily, and that will basically go up against the CV joint. Okay, to lubricate, no, not to lubricate, but to keep the grease in the hub. Alright, we'll flip it around. We'll take just a little bit of that grease. Okay, we'll put it into that section over there, that hubby section over there, and then we'll lubricate the next bearing, okay, which is this one over here. Okay, as I said, what I normally do, I just put a lot of that grease in the palm of my hand there. Okay, and then just do that kind of motion. Okay, just to ram the grease in, you know, in by the groove over there. Just ram it in, rotate and ram. Then you can take your thumb, you can push some of the grease in like that. Okay, and then just rotate the bearing around a little bit. You can feel it's lubricating nicely. Alright, and then we put that off in. Okay, feel that's nice and smooth. Get rid of the packaging there, and then we'll just go ahead and put the other seal on. Okay, there's another seal there. That seal comes on the outside. I just normally do this. You know, get a flat piece of wood or a flat piece of metal. Alright, so right, that is half the easy part, at least I should say. Now the difficult part would be to get this hub pressed, to get the stub axle pressed into the hub without damaging the bearing. Okay, so how I normally do it, alright, what I normally do, I normally take a nice big socket and make sure that socket would basically, you know, if you look at the bearing, the center part of the bearing, that unit should hold that center part of that bearing in place. Okay, then as you're pressing that hub in, okay, it's exerting pressure on the center, not on the outer part of the bearing, so it's not going to damage the outer part of the bearing. Okay, so we need to get this unit in a vise, okay, that way around, like that. So before we press this unit together with a, you know, before we press the stub axle into the hub, we need to put back the brake disc, okay, which I'm doing now. So I'll get back to you when I have this brake disc assembled on the stub axle and all tight, ready for pressing. So this is how we'll stack it. Okay, We'll first put that down. We'll put the center down onto that socket, and then we will take the stub axle complete. We'll put the stub axle in on top into the center like that. Okay, and then now we will be able to press this whole unit in. Okay, and as we are pressing the stub axle into the hub, okay, that center, that socket I have in the center there, will just basically hold the center. The two centers of the bearings will basically push against each other. Okay, and we push them tight enough until we know that they are nicely pressed on. All right, take that off. Now we can roll it. Okay, smooth as a baby's bum. Okay, now we need to take the stub axle and put it back. So you can now see that that stub axle has now come right through the bearing, okay, through the centers of both bearings, and those two pieces of bearing are basically pushing up against each other, forming one whole bearing. Okay, so now we'll put this unit back. So quite simply, we'll first mount it onto the strut. One bolt, another bolt, okay, 2 nuts. Now what I normally do, I normally assemble everything first before I give the final tightening. Okay, so we've got the stub axle in. Okay, we'll get the CV joint through the center. Okay, and then we'll get the ball joint to go in. Alright, we'll take the ball joint bolt. We'll take the ball joint nut and bolt as well. We'll get that to go through with the washer and the nut. So we've got that on. Okay, and then of course we've got the washer, and we've got a new nut for the CV joint just against. Can also get our caliper on. Long bolt on top. If you remember, long bolt on top, short bolt at the bottom. It actually won't work the other way around because, you know, the sliders are also different lengths. So if you don't put the right length on, the bolt won't thread. So we'll tighten up the caliper, make sure that it's sufficiently tight, because you don't want to leave it loose. Because if you do leave it loose, you're going to have problems with the brakes. Okay. Okay, nice and tight. We get our pipe back in there, but before we do that, we're going to have to tighten up those units. Okay, so I'll go ahead and tighten it up. Don't forget to tighten up your nut and bolt for the ball joint, and the 2 nuts and bolts for the stuff for the hub. Okay, and then of course when you tight all that tight, you put your rubber piping back with a clip and so on. Right, so I'll get back to you once I've got all this tightened, and don't forget to put your tie rod in back as well. Okay, so on board the Mazda 323, just taking it for a drive to listen to the road noises. Yeah, if those wheel bearings are still making a noise. And it's definitely nice and quiet. It's more quiet than what it was when the car came in. You know, when you coast it like this, you could hear the wheel bearings rolling, you know, and so I'm quite happy. So yes, I would like to thank you for joining me once again in my workshop. As you can see, you know, hard work normally generates a little bit of sweat. But, you know, we are still during our country's lockdown, worldwide lockdown. And, you know, I just want to say, please be careful out there, you know, adhere to the country's laws and rules. And, you know, this is a very, very real virus, and it can kill. Okay, so take the necessary precautions. I count myself lucky because, you know, my profession falls under the basically essential services. So we, you know, help keep the country's wheels turning. Okay, so transportation, you know, delivery vehicles, all that kind of thing, very essential during this period. So therefore we are given permission to operate, but under certain conditions. Okay, so I hope that you found this video useful. Okay, the information in it contained, I hope that it does help you out, maybe help you you know, do a procedure, save yourself a little bit of money, you know, and you know, don't be shy to like the video and to share it. And if you have not subscribed yet, consider it, because it is beneficial. It's free. All that it takes is you on the internet, your expenses for that. But thank you very much for watching this video, subscribing if you have. Until my next video, Gary Dela Cruz from VehicleMaintenanceandRepairs.com. Drive safely. Cheerio.